In 2006, I was a 17-year-old boy, starting my senior year of high school. I was in a dating relationship with a girl who was actually part of the Wiccan occult here in Paulding County. I was really interested in spiritual things, but I'd never been really religious before in my life. Never really thought about it or been interested in it at all. But for whatever reason, when I was 17, I started really thinking about spirituality and whether or not there was a God out there in the universe or some power that was in control of day-to-day life. So, I was interested in it. It kind of was interesting to me that this person I was dating was, there were some spiritual things going on in their house, and it interested me. And I was invited to go actually out to a seance with them in the woods, dancing around fires and calling down spirits. It was interesting to me that those weren't just things that happened in movies, but they were actually things that happened around. There are a lot of people that are interested in spiritual things, and but interestingly enough, something today I'd call it the Holy Spirit, but at that point in time it was just something. It was reaching out. It gripped my heart, and it told me to not go out into the woods to go to this event, and it also told me that I needed to end my relationship. It was overpowering. It was very powerful in my heart that I didn't have the ability to disobey. I had to obey this gripping feeling in my heart. So I did. I did not go to this. I did not go to this event. I ended my relationship, and I just started being me, and I hung out with some friends I was a band nerd. We were getting ready for a very big band season. Woohoo to all my band nerds out there. And we had put a lot of preparation and time into the season, and we were expecting to win a couple of big championships that year, and it was looking like it was going to be a great year. And one of my closest friends was in the band. He was a tenor drummer. That's the drums that you carry on your shoulders. There's 4 drums across and one tiny one in the middle. And John, he was one of my best friends at the time, invited me to come to church. He invited me to come to Hope Church, to come to the student ministry that is still here today, Fusion. It's an awesome student ministry, and I was like, okay, I'll go. But he kind of tricked me into it. He needed my mom's car to transport 3 of these tenor drums up here to the church, and so I was like, all right, I'll go. So I grabbed my mom's car. We got the drums from the school. I guess it was Tuesday night after band practice was over, and we brought them up here to the church and dropped them off and got them all set up and everything for John to play his solo. And I didn't realize it was actually the first Fusion of the school year. And so I came back the next evening, and Wednesday night I sat on the front row here in the worship center, and I saw John do this crazy 15-drum solo to kick off Fusion for that year. And I don't remember much else about the service that night, but I remember that I had a blast, that it was the greatest time I'd ever had. And it just so happened that I was invited to come to church. I was invited to come here to Fusion at the same time that I was becoming really interested in spiritual things. And so God really had a hand in getting me here at the time that he did. Not only in me being interested in spiritual things, but also what God knew beforehand that would happen the next day. The very next day was August 17th, 2006. I was at band practice. It was Thursday night. We always had late practice that day, and so we practiced late, and me and some friends were going to jump in the car and go get some Taco Bell. Taco night Thursday is a great tradition to add to Taco Tuesday. Everyone should eat tacos on Thursday. But we were going to go get some tacos, and we had to take one of our other friends home first. And I was driving. We were still in my mom's car because I had to use them to get the drums back to the school Thursday for practice. And so we were on the way to take her home, and I don't really remember anything past that. I've been told a lot about it, and I recollect a couple of things here and there, but not a lot. I was driving down the road, lost control of the car, went off the side of the road, hit a driveway, and rolled 5 times. 2 of my friends, John and Rihanna, were ejected from the vehicle. Ryan, my other friend that was in the car, was bounced around inside the car a little bit, and he actually came to rest on top of me at the end. I had a pretty severe concussion in the accident, and like I said, I don't remember any of it. Sunday, this was on a Thursday night. Sunday morning, my dad came in to sit on my bed, and I thought that I had been in a bicycle accident. And my dad was to my right, my mom was on my left, and I remember seeing my friend Jeb from South Georgia sitting across the room with his back to me. And Dad told me that I hadn't been in a bicycle accident. I had actually been in a car accident. I had wrecked and totaled my mom's car, and John and Rihanna, who had been ejected from the vehicle, both passed away that night. Ryan didn't pass away. He's still here. We're still pretty close friends to this day. But I remember feeling my world falling apart, unraveling, and just spinning out of control. I didn't know how to fix what I'd done. I didn't know how to move forward. I didn't know what to do or how to even be me again. But the people of Hope Church, who I'd come to one time, I'd come to this church one time, they reached out to us. There were plenty of families from this church that brought us food. They were there to take care of us and help us through circumstance after circumstance after circumstance of issues with the legal system and upset families and bitterness. And I remember seeing the faith of John's mom, Lisa. It was really a turning point for me in what had become my initial walk with God, and seeing what God was up to and how he was at work in the world. Lisa had faith that could move mountains. And I know that's cliche to say, but I've never met anyone in my life that had a stronger faith than Lisa Hicks. Seeing her example was a huge blessing to me and my family. She was John's mom, my best friend at the time. They lived about 8 houses down from us in the same neighborhood, and Lisa had 1 month before that lost her husband due to a heart attack, and then a month later to have lost her son tragically in a car accident. But to still come and sit with me and to tell me that I was forgiven and that she didn't hold it against me, and that God had bigger plans for me and he had better things for me down the road, and that I was here and that I was made for a purpose, and that God had had things in store for my life. To see that kind of faith from someone who'd gone through so much was an encouragement to me and a huge part of my road to restoration and how I got to the point that I am today. And in videoing this right now, my son is a week old today, and it's unfathomable for me to think about the blessing that I get to partake in now in being a father and carrying on a part of me after I should have died in that car accident. But being able to sit here and know that I'm able to continue to live my life for the glory of Christ, and I'm able to pass on what I've learned and what I've grown from to my own son now, is unreal. I can't imagine being anywhere else. And while it was absolutely no fun walking down that road, today looking back, I'm grateful and thankful that I have walking down that road, because it's made me who I am today. It is what introduced me to Christ. It is what has helped lay the groundwork of Christ in my life so that I might continue to live a life for His name's sake and for His glory.
Amen. So, there's this guy named Job. Maybe you've heard of him. He is a man of great wealth and great character. And he was so great that he has his own book in the Bible. It's cleverly entitled, The Book of Job. He had no other idea, so he just went with his own name. It's called The Book of Job. And I need to tell you a little bit about Job to establish his character before we go into the story. Now, we're actually going to start with his financials. So we're going to check his bank account here. You'll see in your info guide, if you flip it around on the back, you have a left-hand margin and a right-hand margin. So this is going to factor in later. We're going to do some math in the sermon today, and I hate math. So, this is a very special Sunday. So I need to tell you a little bit about Job. Job had 7,000 sheep. He had 3,000 camels. That's a lot of camels. And he had, so you can quote me on that, that's a lot of camels. And he had 500 oxen and 500 donkeys. Now, to us, that kind of sounds like Old MacDonald had a farm. I don't really care. We don't really associate animals with wealth. Back in Job's time, they did. Job, all those numbers prove that Job was incredibly wealthy. However, he wasn't just a man of great wealth. He was a man of great character. And the text describes his character with these 4 qualities. Now, you have to pay attention to these, because these will be brought up again and again in the story. It says that Job is blameless, he is upright, he fears God, and he turns from evil. Okay, so remember that. Blameless, upright, fears God, and turns from evil. So great wealth, great character, and it says in the text that Job was far greater than any other man in the East. The best man there was. Now, I have to tell you a little bit about the Job genre, or Job genre. What genre we're in when we're in the book of Job. The book of Job is considered wisdom literature. And wisdom literature teaches you how to do life well, and how to walk with the Lord and make your way in life, and quite frankly, prosper. Now, wisdom literature is Proverbs, Psalms, Ecclesiastes, Job. These are just some examples. And they're predicated on this idea and this belief that's espoused in Proverbs 1, that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom or knowledge. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom or knowledge. That is foundational. That's from Proverbs 1. In Psalms 1, we see kind of a deeper level of foundation here that we build the wisdom literature and the ideals therein upon. And it's the righteous prosper and the wicked perish. This is what Psalms 1 starts with. The righteous will prosper, the wicked will perish. And scholars comment on this now, and they have this term for it, a term for what kind of sprung from this kind of teaching and mindset. It's called the retribution principle. Say retribution principle. And it's hard to say, retribution principle, I've only practiced this 1,000 times. The retribution principle teaches that if you do good, you'll get good. If you do bad, you get bad. Okay? So see the correlation here. This retribution principle teaches that the righteous will prosper and the wicked will perish. It teaches that if you do good things will happen to you. If you do bad things will happen to you. So that's kind of the foundation of this wisdom literature. I mean, that's true to an extent. I think you reap what you sow to an extent. The Bible is pretty consistent with that. There's two problems with this, though. It's a bit simplistic, and it gives us all the control. I mean, in that line of thinking, I'm all set. I mean, I don't really need God. I'm a pretty good dude. I'll just do good things, and I'll get good things. I don't really need God watching out for me because I already know how everything works. I'll do good things, I'll get good things, wham, bam, done. So it's a little egocentric, and we kind of have all the control in that system. It's kind of the first problem with it. The second problem with it being a little too simple is that we all know that it's not true all the time. The righteous do not always prosper. And sometimes you can do everything right, and you do not get rewarded for it. It almost seems like you get punished for it. Because, quite frankly, sometimes bad things happen to good people. Now, this whole retribution principle is going to be investigated in the book of Job. They're going to take this principle and they're going to kind of shake it up a little bit and turn it on its head and question it. And in this, we see further depths of wisdom. So, our story starts out in the book of Job with one of the main characters. His name, maybe you've heard of him, God. And so God's in his heavenly realm. And God is approached by one of the other main characters, known as the adversary. Now, in some of your Bibles, it will say Satan. In Hebrew, the word used here is ha-satan. It's a more general term. It means the adversary. Ha-satan, the adversary. So this adversary, there is tremendous amount of ambiguity as to who this character is. It's just the adversary. The adversary approaches the Lord in the heavenly realms. And God says, hey, where you been? And the adversary says, doing my thing, roaming the earth. And God says, so, have you considered, the literal Hebrew here is, have you put into your heart, have you considered my servant Job? And then God goes on to describe Job's characteristics and uses those 4 qualities we discussed earlier. He says, Job is blameless and he is upright. He fears God and he turns from evil. There is no other man like Job in the whole earth. He is a great man. So he's just bringing up Job, just talking about Job. And the accuser goes, yeah, because you put a hedge of protection around him, and because you bless the works of his hands, and because you have increased his wealth and his possessions, that's the reason he's a good dude. And so what the adversary here is doing is he's questioning Job's motivation. And he's insinuating that yeah, Job's got your little system figured out. Job knows that if he does good things, he'll get good things. And that if he's righteous, he'll prosper. And hey, it's working. So he doesn't really need you. And he's surely not doing this because he loves you. He's just doing all this stuff because he's figured out your little system. So again, this retribution principle is kind of getting turned on its head a little bit and investigated. And then a wager is made. And the adversary says, I guarantee you that if, and this is the literal Hebrew reading here, if you stretch out, if you send your hand and touch him or strike him, and you take away all he has, he will curse you to your face. Challenge is issued. And so God says, okay. And there's a lot of conjecture about this, so I'm just going to tell you the literal translation. He says, he is in your hand. okay? There's a lot of conjecture of like, is God doing stuff to Job in the story? Is the adversary doing stuff? The literal reading is, he is in your hand. And so the adversary says, okay. And then one stipulation is made. God says, listen, hey, right here. You can't kill him and you can't physically harm him. Deal? And the accuser says, deal. Or the adversary says, that's a deal. And then the adversary starts to resort. And then, that's how I picture it in my mind. Sorry. All right. So then, we have Job, man of great wealth, great character. In one fell swoop, Job's entire world falls apart. And much of the book of Job is poetry. So there's this kind of rhythm here. It's very poetic, it's very beautiful. It's tragic, but beautiful in its composition. And it says, one of Job's servants runs to him and says, your 7,000 sheep have been stolen, and the servants guarding them have been killed. And then another servant runs to him and says, oh no, your 3,000 camels have been stolen, and your servants that were guarding them have been killed. And then another servant runs to him and says, your 500 oxen have been stolen, and the servants guarding them have been killed. And then another servant runs to him and says, your 500 donkeys have been stolen, and the servants guarding them have been killed. And just like that, Job loses everything. He goes bankrupt. He loses everything he owns. He's got nothing. But then he gets the worst report of all. And one of his servants runs to him and says, your children were all dining in your oldest son's house, because Job had 7 sons and 3 daughters. Remember that too. They were dining in the oldest brother's house, and a great wind kicked up and destroyed the 4 corners of the house, and it collapsed and killed all of your children. Now, there's a little Hebrew wordplay here. In the Hebrew mindset, it was believed that the wind came from the 4 corners of the earth. And so what he's saying here is the wind from the 4 corners of the earth destroyed the 4 corners of the house. And Job, you have now truly lost everything. And Job has that moment that many of us have experienced of great tragedy, overwhelming loss. It's that phone call that you get. Bad news on the other line. It's that doctor's report where the doctor can't really look you in the eyes when they tell you what the prognosis is. It's waking up from a coma and realizing that that was no bicycle wreck, that lives were lost. And so we've all been here to some extent in our lives. Now here's the true test. This is a moment for Job. And remember this wager we have, this contest, if you will. And all eyes are on Job to see how he responds. So Job starts with lament. And he shaves his head and he tears his clothes. Now, some of you are like, what does that even mean? That was an ancient Hebrew practice of grieving and laments. And Job shaves his head and tears his robes. And it says that he falls or he bows to the ground. And it says, catch this, he worships. What? That's a weird response to suffering. He falls to his knees and he worships. What? That's got to be a typo. And then Job drops this brilliant quote. And he says, naked I came into the world, and naked I will return. And what he's saying there is, I had nothing to start with, and I'm going to have nothing to end with. So it's all just gift in the first place. It's not mine to possess. And he says, the Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. Regardless, blessed be the name of the Lord. What? Job is not operating in this retribution principle. Whoa. I was righteous. I should have good things happen to me. He says the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And the text is very clear here. It says that Job, lo chata, he did not sin. And lo natan tifla, he did not give blame to God. Because that's what's in view here. Job did not sin and he did not give blame to God. Okay, contest over. Done. Job wins, God wins. We're all set, right? Right? Wrong. Time for round 2. So, a very similar scene. This is just brilliant writing, great repetition and rhythm. Same scene unfolds where you have main character, God, up in heaven, and the adversary approaches. Now, as the adversary approaches, I want you to consider what just happened. And I read this interaction, perhaps God is a little smug here, a little tongue-in-cheek, because God's like, so, where you been? And the accuser's like, or the adversary's like, just roaming the earth, doing my thing. And then God says, so, have you considered my servant Job? And we all know that Job just won the contest. And once again, the Lord states Job's 4 great qualities, but then he adds one here, so you have to pay attention to it. He says, there's no other man like Job. He is blameless and upright. He fears God, and he turns from evil. And what's more, he has maintained his integrity. That is added for a reason, and that is significant. He has maintained his integrity. So it's kind of like in your face. So the adversary says, yeah, because you didn't let me hurt him, okay? And then, there's a really cool quote here. He says, skin for skin. A man will give anything for his life. Translation is, if you let me hurt him, he'll start acting crazy. He'll throw everyone under the bus if you let me physically hurt him. So he says, let me strike his flesh and his bones, and then he will curse you to your face. So God says, okay, once again, he is in your hand, but you must save his life. You mustn't kill him. He's in your hands, but you cannot kill him. And so the adversary says, you got yourself a deal. And he goes off to do his thing. And then Job, having lost his wealth, his children, becomes physically afflicted, and he gets boils. So think about that achiness you get from a flu mixed with sunburn, mixed with a bad rash, mixed with blisters, mixed with getting really bad 3rd-degree burns. This is boils, okay? Has anyone in here ever had boils? I don't think it's a thing anymore. No? Bubonic plague? No one? Okay. So just lots of pain, okay? That's the punchline to that. Lots of pain. And so Job, in agony, now physical agony, says that he drops down to the dust and the ashes, and he grabs part of a broken pot, and he begins scraping his arm because he's trying to get all the dead skin off and all the boils and all the, gross stuff. And here, at his lowest moment, his dear sweet wife walks in. And Mrs. Job enters the scene. And she rushes to her husband's side and she says, honey, why do you maintain your dignity, you dummy? Just curse God and die. She's a real treat. A real treat. I always imagine what Job was thinking in that moment, he took all my children, but he leaves me with you. Hey. You are my biggest boil. And then Job responds brilliantly, and he says, what you have spoken is foolishness. And he says, now I'm going to give you the more literal translation, and we'll clean it up in English. He says, the good we will receive from the Lord, and the bad we will not receive from the Lord. Translation, should we accept the good and not the bad that comes from the hand of the Lord? What? He's saying, no matter what, I trust the Lord. Whether it's bad or it's good, if it's good or it's bad, we accept everything that comes from the hand of the Lord. Are you kidding me with that kind of faith? The text is really clear. Once again, lo chata, Job does not sin. Lo natan tifla, Job does not give blame to God. And it adds this, it says, and he maintained his integrity. All right, contest over. Done, we're good here. Job wins, God wins. That's a win. Yes. not so fast. The book of Job goes on for 38 more chapters. 38 more chapters. It kind of seems like the story's over, but it's not. I would suggest is because suffering is a process. And a lot of times in the wake of a disaster, your adrenaline kicks in. And you spring into action, and you're ready to go. And you're like, yeah, I can handle stuff. Okay, I'm all good. I'm taking care of everyone. I'm planning things. We're all good. And your mind is so fixed on what needs to be done that it doesn't have time to lament and grieve. And so you're in it. But it's those days afterward where suffering truly sets in. It's the waking up every day with a new normal. It's the realizing that things will never be the same again. And that's where suffering is truly trying. So Job goes on for 38 more chapters because suffering is a process. And we see how he deals with it. And I will suggest that we have much to learn from Job. And I believe that there is a way to suffer beautifully. So, at this point in the story, we're introduced to 3 new characters. I'm going to bring up 3 of the band members. I need to introduce you to 3 characters in the story. As they make their way up, warning, these names are really weird. First of all, we have Eliphaz. What's up, Eliphaz? Okay, he's got his own symbol, all right. Then we have Bildad. What's up, Bildad? Give it up for everyone. Say hi, Bildad. All right, and then we have, lastly, Zophar. Say hi, Zophar. Everyone's like, what was the name? Zophar. Sounds like a character in a sci-fi novel. Zophar. All right, so Zophar. Job's 3 friends. And Job's 3 friends see him sitting down in the dust and the ash. And they do the right thing. And they come, sit with their friends. Buddies. Buddies! Sorry. Okay, so why is this? Yeah, man space. Let's go. There we go. Buffer zone. Why are they doing this? This is actually an ancient Hebrew practice for lamentation and grief. And it's known as sitting Shiva. Be careful how you say it. Sitting Shiva. And what happened in this practice is that in the wake of a tragedy or a great loss, one's friends and family would rush to their side, and for 7 days, Shiva means 7 in Hebrew, for 7 days, they would sit with the person who was suffering. And in this process, they did not try to explain the suffering. They did not try to attribute blame to someone or something for the suffering. And they did not try to give 3 easy steps to get over your suffering quickly. Right? Instead, they would sit in silence. In public speaking, you call that a pregnant pause. Worked. Nailed it. All right. Sorry. So they would sit in silence. Can I just say, we probably have a lot to learn from this practice? So for 7 days, they were great friends and did the right thing by sitting Shiva with their friends. But unfortunately, after 7 days, they take their great friendship and their great approach and they destroy it and they do the wrong thing. And for the rest of the book of Job, his friends line up and it turns into a courtroom scene and his friends put him on trial. And so one by one, they confront him. So first of all, we have Eliphaz here. Throw it up. Okay. Eliphaz, okay, so this guy says, we know that the innocent do not perish. And we know that those who sow in iniquity will reap trouble. And so he's insinuating that you must have done something wrong, Job, because we all know that the wicked perish. And it looks like you're perishing, therefore you must be wicked. He's caught up in this retribution principle. He even accuses Job at one point of being greedy, and maybe that's why it happened, because he was rich. So Eliphaz is a bad friend, Eliphaz. Back in line. Then Bildad steps up. Well, Bildad, all right. These guys are about it. I like it. And Bildad, check this out. Bildad says, well, God must have simply been letting your children experience the consequence of their sin. He has given them over to their iniquity. Translation, your kids died because they must have done something wrong, Job. This guy's got a lot of nerve with this guy. And he too is a bad friend. Back of the line. All right? Then Zophar steps up, this joker. He says, you know what, Job? You know what? You're probably blessed. Because for whatever you did, God is probably being actually gracious in this punishment. You probably deserve worse suffering than you're encountering. You kidding me with this? And he too is a bad friend. Back to the line. And this happens in a cycle of 3 different times throughout the book of Job. His friends keep coming at him, and he has to keep defending himself. All of their arguments are predicated upon this retribution principle. No, Job, shh, stop, quiet. We all know that if you do good things, you get good things, and if you do bad things, you get bad things. And we all know that the righteous, they prosper, and the wicked, they perish. So what's happening to Job is offending their sensibilities. They're like, no. We know the system. Nah, you had to have done something wrong. It's the only explanation. They're so caught up with it. I think that is a fool's errand. So Job responds. And he says, you are a bunch of worthless physicians. Oh, and you want to give me wisdom? When you were sitting in silence, that was wisdom. Wisdom is shh is your wisdom. Quiet. Silence would be true wisdom to you. And then he says, all you do is offer me proverbs of ash. So he tells him off. And then Job makes another statement of faith. And he says, now again, he was given into the hands of the adversary, but it's almost like that doesn't even matter. He thinks that, okay, maybe God is persecuting me. I don't know. And then Job says, though he slays me, I will yet hope in him. Woo! That's some faith. And we see that Job stands firm despite his terrible friends. All right, even though they're terrible, let's give them a round of applause while they're going off stage. Thanks, guys. So we had one court scene. Now, in Job's defending himself, he didn't do anything necessarily bad, but a lot of scholars say he starts treading on some thin ice because he really starts to question the righteousness of God and the justice of God. And so we have, towards the end of Job, one more confrontation. And so we have a confrontation between Job and God. Now, watch how God approaches. This is pretty crazy. It says that God appears to Job in a whirlwind. And he's coming at him. And then the first thing he says, now, if you have your Bibles out in the book of Job, it will say, dress like a man, or prepare yourself. In Hebrew, it actually reads, gird up your loins. It's like he's telling him to line up for a penalty kick in soccer. It's strong language. And he says, I'm coming at you. And then, this is fascinating to see. The writing here is actually kind of sarcastic. And so, and this is all in chapters 38 on. God says, I'm sorry, Job. I'm sorry with the questioning and all. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? No, really, tell me. Like, where were you when I told the sea it can go this far and no further? I mean, you've explored the depths of the sea, right? Like, you've walked the depths of the sea. Yeah, you have. Oh, okay. Yeah, and tell me again, I forget, how many clouds are in the sky? Because you can count those, right? And I can't remember what. Oh, it was you. It was you who put wisdom in the hearts of men. That's right, that was you, because you were around for creation, right? Yeah, you were around for it, because you are that old, right? No, you're not. That's strong. Woo! That's in the book of Job. In Job's response, he says, I'm going to be silent, and I'm going to put my hand over my mouth. And then God says, not good enough, not yet, I'm not done. And then God goes on to describe his glory and his wonders. I was listening to this group of scholars talk about it, and there was this really old British guy, and he's like, he had to read this part, and he's like, this part is so beautiful, I can't read it or I'll start crying. And so he's literally like 1,000. I think he knew Job. I think that's why it was hard for him. But I can't read it, it's so sad. And God goes on to describe his majesty and his wonder. And then Job, check this out. Job drops down and says, I have spoken of things I do not understand that are too wonderful for me, that I do not know. I will repent in the dust, in the ashes. Wow. And so, by the end of this whole trial kind of courtroom unfolding in Job, we see Job accepting what has happened in the dust and the ash. But we've seen this before in the story of Job, towards the beginning. And I would suggest that after Job experienced all that suffering, he dropped to his knees in the dust and the ashes to worship. I would suggest that perhaps this is exactly where Job was supposed to be the whole time. And I think there's something for us to learn here. I think it's okay to wrestle with what has happened in your life. I think it's okay to question God and to even be frustrated at times. That happens through Scripture, especially in the book of Psalms. But the book of Psalms also ends with unabashed praise to God. And so our questioning and our struggling should always be bookended by praise. And I would suggest that while it's okay to wrestle and to suffer and to question, perhaps it is better, like Job, to not speak of things that we do not understand, that are too wonderful for us, that we do not know. And perhaps we should accept the good and the bad that comes from the hand of the Lord and realize that the Lord gives and the Lord takes away, but regardless, blessed be the name of the Lord. And perhaps we should get caught up, instead of in our suffering, which is very real and very painful, we get caught up in the awe and wonder of God, and we worship. And in this way, it is a beautiful distraction. And maybe that's where we're supposed to be our whole lives. Now, I know some of you that really resonates. And the Holy Spirit stirs your heart when you hear that. And other people say, that's unsatisfying. I don't like that. I promised I preach these things because I've had to live them. And I don't have time to go into my story today, but I can promise you guys, over the last 6 years of my life, I have lost everything, including my health. And that has not ceased. And in my suffering, and in this illness that I live with every single day, that makes life incredibly difficult. And that brings a lot of mystery into my life of when it will take a turn for the worse. I promise you, because I've been blessed to sit under some great teaching, I have realized the entire time, even though some people in my life shook their fist at God and they're like, why are you doing this to him? And some people in my life said to me, what did you do? Just like Job's friends, I've known that it's okay to struggle and to suffer and to question, but it is better to not speak of things I do not understand, that are too wonderful for me, that I do not know. And I have learned the beautiful practice of accepting the good and the bad that comes from the hand of the Lord, and realize that the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. But regardless, blessed be the name of the Lord. And I have tried to lose myself in the awe and wonder of God. And I'll tell you something. When you open yourself up that much, and you open up your palms that much, you don't hold on tightly to things anymore. And you don't feel like you're entitled to certain things, like good health or a normal heart. You see every single thing in your life as a gift coming from the giver of lights. And that even that next breath you're taking is a gift. So Job teaches us how to suffer well and to suffer beautifully. But it also teaches us how to deal with the suffering of others. So if you're here today and you are struggling right now and you're walking a painful road, I need you to look around this room right now. Just look around the room. And I need you to know that we here at Hope Church are sitting Shiva with you. And that in your suffering, you are not alone. And we are with you. But even more than that, in your darkest night, And in your lowest moment, in your most painful suffering, God is with you. And the perfect picture of this is the incarnation of Jesus Christ, where God took on flesh and made his dwelling among us to suffer like we suffer, and to go through tragedy and heartache, so much so that he took on all that tragedy and heartache and all that suffering on the cross and said it's done. And the cross is God's way of looking at us and saying, hey, I get it, I'm with you. There's this story about this guy. He's a Jewish man. He survived the Holocaust, and he actually survived the concentration camp at Auschwitz. And there's this one part in the story where he talks about how all the prisoners were huddled around in this courtyard, and they were going to hang 3 people for kind of a form of treason, but to also keep everyone else in order and in line. And he says they drop them from the gallows, and 2 of the men die immediately. But the one young man doesn't. And he has to watch him hang and writhe there and struggle for life and gasp for breath. And he has to sit there and watch that, the guy who wrote the book. And he says he distinctly remembers hearing a voice scream behind him saying, "Where is God?" And I think sometimes we feel like that in our suffering. And this man who survived the Holocaust said, I knew deep in my soul exactly where God was. God was hanging in the gallows right there with him. And I think the cross is God's way of hanging in the gallows with us. So know that in your greatest suffering, God is with you. And while I hope that gives you courage and confidence, I can tell you this too. God is not only in your suffering, but the Bible is quite clear that God is above your suffering. And we see in the story of Job that God doesn't go anywhere the entire time. God is there and he sees the whole thing and he's sovereign over the whole process. And in Romans 8:28, Paul writes about this and he says, we know that in all things God works together for good. The Bible is quite clear. We're going to talk about Joseph and his brothers in a couple weeks. One of the things God does is he takes evil and he takes bad and he just makes good out of it. It's what he does. So know that God is not only in your suffering, but he is above your suffering. And he's working every single thing in your life out for good. So I should probably finish the story of Job. It says at the end of Job, I love this part, after this great suffering, it says that the Lord restored to Job a double portion, twice what Job lost. So let's go back to the math. Get your info guide out. So at the beginning of the story, we have some numbers there on the left side. I hope you wrote them down. At the end of the story, it says that Job has now 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels. That's a lot of camels. 1,000 oxen and 1,000 donkeys. Now, I need you to calculate, what is the mathematical correlation between those two sets of numbers? Double. God, from the beginning of Job to the end, has mathematically doubled what Job lost. And he restores to him 7 more sons and 3 more daughters. And it says that Job lived to a ripe old age and that he saw 4 generations of children. Now, most of us will only ever live to see 2 generations of children. Job lived to see 4. That's double. So this is brilliant mathematical doubling at the end of Job. And it says, and I find comfort in this, great comfort. It says that the latter years of Job's life were even better than the former. But we need to know that God did not owe Job any kind of retribution. But in his grace and his kindness, he brought Job restoration. And I preach these things because I've experienced them. I can't go into the full story, but despite a horrible illness that I live with, the Lord has been very kind and very generous and has brought great healing into my life. And God did not owe me or does not owe me any kind of retribution, but in his grace and his kindness, he has brought about much restoration in my life. And my ability to stand up here today with you is a testament to the grace and the kindness of God I should probably finish the story about Daniel too. Daniel was involved in a horrible car accident, and 2 lives were lost. And if you're sitting out here, Lisa, or you're watching online, I would like to thank you for your faithfulness in that low moment, how you showed Daniel the love and acceptance and forgiveness of Jesus Christ. I say thank you for that. God, despite Daniel's suffering, does not owe Daniel any kind of retribution. But in his grace and his kindness, he has brought Daniel great restoration and has blessed him with 2 lives in his life. So I would like to introduce you to the Barron family, and if you haven't met him yet, to their brand new baby boy, Andy Barron. We were going to have Daniel go to the end of the stage and Simba him, but we thought it would be dangerous. So go ahead and rise for the last song in the benediction. So today, Hope Church, though many of you feel slain in what has happened to you, may you yet hope in God. And may you not speak to things that you do not understand or that are too wonderful or that we do not know, but rather may you accept the good and the bad that comes from the hand of the Lord, and realize that the Lord gives and the Lord takes. But regardless, we bless the name of the Lord. And may we realize together that God does not owe us any kind of retribution, but in his grace and in his kindness, he often will bring us restoration. And so I pray that over you, Hope Church, and I pray that the Lord blesses and keeps you as he leads you on your road to restoration. Grace and peace to you, Hope Church.